Hey, I am going to talk about goal setting, and particularly as it relates to women who have or are on the road to burnout. It's mostly inspired by the kind of stuff I'm seeing on LinkedIn at the moment. It's December, coming to the end of a year, going into the start of a new year, and there are articles absolutely everywhere encouraging people to start to set their goals for 2020, and people are posting pictures of all the books they're planning to read over Christmas and New Year, personal development books and management books and all of that good stuff. And I was that person for a long time. I would spend my New Year's Eve every single year setting goals and drawing it up and setting goals for the whole year, and I'd review it every month, every quarter. And I was very focused on goals. You know, when you exist in the corporate world, you don't start a project, you don't move until you've set your goals, because goals are essential for success when you live in that paradigm. And then I got to 40 and I burnt out. I mean, I completely hit the wall. It's another video for another day, but it took me the best part of 8 to 10 years to dig myself out of the hole. So there's not a lot about burnout, exhaustion, anxiety that I haven't kind of experienced myself. Anyway, that whole episode of my life forced me to completely reevaluate how I work, how I live, how I define success and happiness. And this year, for the first year, I did not spend my New Year's Eve making goals. So I'm going to talk in the next kind of 5 to 10 minutes about, if you're a woman who is struggling with burnout or you're on the road to burnout, why you might want to step away from the kind of goal setting exercise for a while. So here's the first problem with goals. The very nature of goals is that you're adding more stuff in. You're adding more things into your life. Goals are very usually about taking stuff out. Now, if you're a kind of high-flying, successful corporate woman in her 40s or 50s, you've probably already got a really busy life. You know, a lot of us are doing 10, 12-hour days. We're doing back-to-back meetings. You might have a coach already. You might be working on a whole kind of personal development plan with a coach. You might have a personal trainer, or you go to yoga a couple of times a week. You might be going out for dinner and drinks with friends. You might have kids. You might have a partner. Anybody who's watching this video has a full life. Your life is probably full to the brim already with stuff. And so we sit down at the beginning of the year and we talk about all of the extra things we're going to do, and there's this big fashion around big, hairy, audacious goals. So a lot of the goals we set ourselves are actually really big. They're not small things very often, and women like us tend to be the kind of women who set goals like, you know, I'm going to run an ultramarathon or whatever. So we're putting more and more pressure on ourselves. We're putting more and more into a day that's already full. So if you're a woman who's burnt out, or you're dealing with ill health due to stress, anxiety, panic attacks, just a thing for you to ask yourself, to explore with yourself, is adding more things into my life actually useful for me at this point? Because it might be actually that the answer for you is to do less and to slow down a bit more. So that's the first problem with goals. Second problem with goals, and this is a topic that fascinates me endlessly, is that so many of our goals are based on beating ourselves up. A lot of the personal development world is personal development or spiritual development, actually, dressed up as beating ourselves up. And it's really interesting, if you've kind of watched what's gone on in the world the last 5 to 10 years, there are these mega industries that have kind of come out of nowhere. Coaching industry, the spiritual industry, HR is huge. These concepts, these industries, the idea that we would all buy personal development books every year and go on courses to better ourselves, that didn't exist 10 to 15 years ago. And the fundamental problem with a lot of those industries is that while they all kind of look like they're well-meaning, actually a lot of them are based on the idea that there is something fundamentally wrong with you that needs to be improved. So there's a lot of people out there, coaches, writers, people running courses, who are getting richer and richer off you believing that there is something wrong with you. And so many of us now, particularly those of us who are kind of the alpha female in corporate, we're on this kind of constant treadmill of improving ourselves that never stops. So that's the second problem with goals. Actually, a lot of them aren't actually about bettering yourself. They're really about beating yourself up. The third problem I have with goals are really great for things that you want to achieve in the world outside of yourself. So a goal might be, an example of that might be, I'm going to start running this year. I'm going to start going to the gym a couple of times this year. Or it might be, I'm going to paint the bedroom this weekend. But actually, goals aren't useful for the big changes, the things that happen on the inside, which is usually where the kind of issues around burnout and chronic fatigue, panic, stress, anxiety, that's where all of those things manifest from. They manifest from the inside. They don't manifest from, your burnout is not manifesting because you're not doing enough stuff in the world. Your burnout is manifesting because of stories that you tell yourself on the inside, because of how you're holding yourself and holding your energy on the inside. And so if you're a woman who's looking to get more energy, who wants to be free of her anxiety, who's really in the hole on burnout and wants to get better, more goals for things to achieve in the outside world, it's pretty ineffective. It doesn't heal you on the inside. It doesn't tackle the stories and the kind of energetic context that's going on in the inside. So I've got some things for you to think about. So instead of spending your Christmas and New Year making lists of goals, here's some other things for you to think about. So if you're a woman who's really struggling with your energy and you're burnt out, or just stress is affecting your body in a myriad of ways, why don't you, instead of doing more, why don't you think about slowing down? Why don't you think about doing less? Why don't you think about just expending less of your energy in the world outside? Think about talking less. Think about being more quiet and more still. Think about moving through the world with a different energy. Think about moving more slowly with greater calmness, grace, and presence in the world. Ask yourself how you can move things out of your diary. Make a list of all the things in your life that just aren't important, that you're doing anyway, that fill up your diary. Make a list of things you can delegate to other people. Just look at how you can create space for less to happen. Just kind of flip the story that success doesn't necessarily equal doing more. That success, happiness, and your kind of path out of burnout actually comes from doing less. And that's kind of scary for a lot of women because we think that doing more is our value at work. And actually for a lot of us who've kind of come up the corporate ladder, doing more has been how we have become successful at work. So the idea of doing less feels dangerous. But trust that it isn't. Trust that you're senior enough and experienced enough that you can now start to think about doing less and being more still. So that's the first thing. Instead of goals, think about how you can do less. Think about how you can sleep more. I'm the biggest fan of high quality sleep. It's life-changing. If you're a woman who's dealing with burnout, anxiety, any kind of issues, if you're just busy, good sleep is massively underrated. It improves the quality of your life tenfold. So ask about how you can maybe do less in the evenings. Ask yourself how you could make more time for better sleep. Get your hormones tested. Do things to invest in getting your physical health back onto an even keel, because that starts to create the path out of burnout for you. So the next thing that you could think about, instead of writing a list of goals which include tons of ways that you want to improve yourself, perhaps what you could do instead is write a list of all the ways in which you rock. So the great thing about being in your 40s or your 50s is you have got some amazing life experience under your belt. You have done stuff. You've achieved stuff. People like you. People know you. You have talents, you have skills, you have experience. There are things about you that are absolutely amazing. There are things you can do that nobody else can do. There are things that you bring that nobody else can bring. And so why don't you sort of make a list of all of the ways in which you are utterly brilliant, and then ask yourself how you can magnify those things. The kind of corporate HR world has taken us down a bit of a cul-de-sac in the last 5 years with this idea of competency-based management. The idea being, if you want to be senior in an organisation, that you have to be great at everything. And they build these competencies, and you have to be great at everything. And what it's done is create and add to this idea that you're somehow a failure if you're not great at everything. And I'm saying, ditch that idea. Have a look at what it is that you are utterly brilliant at, shine a light on that and magnify it. Now, the reason why that matters, if you're a woman who's burnt out, or you've got anxiety, or you're tired or stressed, is that behind each of these things that you are an absolute genius at, there is this huge source of energy. So when we're trying to force ourselves to do things or to be things that we're not naturally good at, that don't make us happy, that's an energy drain. When we're in our competence and our brilliance and our inspiration, there is so much natural energy that will just come through you without you even having to do anything else. So identify the things, identify your genius competencies, identify your brilliance, and then look at how you can bring that into your everyday life. How do you change what you do at work? How do you change what you focus your attention and your time on? How can you do more of the stuff that gives you more energy? Because it's pure inspiration and brilliance. So that's the second thing. The third thing you could think about doing is stop beating yourself up. I'm going to go out on a limb. I think the I'm not good enough story probably sits in most people's heads, and it's particularly common for women, especially women in corporate. I know I struggled with it for most of my career. It's gone now, mostly, but a lot of women spend an inordinate amount of energy beating themselves up. You might be lying in bed at night thinking about all the things you did or didn't do that day, thinking about all the ways in which you fucked up, thinking about how other people might be judging you or thinking about you, when in reality they're probably just thinking about themselves. They're not wasting any time thinking about you. And we constantly second guess ourselves and we beat ourselves up. And that is a huge energy drain. Women who burn out tend to be women who don't like themselves. It's as simple as that. If you don't like yourself, that manifests in all kinds of strange ways in the external world. So a really simple thing you could do this year is just make this the year that you write the I'm not good enough story, the year that you stop beating yourself up, the year that you become your own best friend. Because if you're not going to look after yourself, no one else is. Your boss isn't, it's not your partner's job, it's not your friend's job, it's your job. You are the only person who can take good care of yourself. It's your job. A really, really simple thing you could do is just make a deal with yourself. Every time you catch yourself slipping into I'm not good enough or some version of that story, you catch the story and you rewrite it with a new story, whatever it is. It could be I'm not perfect, but I'm good enough. Because actually when you start to look at the I'm not good enough story, you realize how ridiculous it is. There's absolutely no rational reason on earth why you're not good enough and somebody else is, right? So why don't you make next year the year that you kill that story dead and you replace it with a story about your own brilliance and your own genius, and just start to be okay with yourself. So that's the third thing. And the fourth thing for you to think about is, instead of goal setting, why don't you think about a reflection practice? So a reflection practice, it could be meditation, it could be journaling, it could be just sitting and having a coffee with yourself, it could be just going and sitting under a park in the tree. But it's the process of shifting your primary focus from the world outside of yourself to the world inside of yourself. Now, the reason why that matters if you're a woman who's dealing with burnout or stress or anxiety is that all of your problems come from something that's going on in here. If you've burnt out, if you're anxious, it's to do with beliefs that you have. It's to do with unhealed wounds, it's to do with dysfunctional energies, it's to do with something that is going on for you on the inside. And when we keep our attention on the outside world, doing, being busy, achievement, keeps you in your ego state, it keeps you in your busy doing state. And all of that gets you in the way of the thing that matters the most if what you're looking for is a long-term solution to your burnout. And that is starting to go inside, starting to challenge the beliefs and the stories that are going on for you that just don't work, challenging the beliefs and the stories that might lead to you being an overachiever or a perfectionist at work, challenging the beliefs and stories that mean that you drive yourself into the ground, challenging the beliefs and stories that lead to problematic relationships with other people, to life choices that you make that don't serve you. And so a reflection practice, a goal setting practice keeps you out there. A reflection practice starts to take you in here. Now you can make it a beautiful, sacred thing. Me personally, I love to get up in the morning and I wear something nice, light a candle, I have my essential oils, and I sit and do my journaling or my meditation. It's like the most sacred, special time of the day. For you, it could be the evening, it could be lunchtime, it could be coffee break, it doesn't matter. But can you just find 5 or 10 minutes every day that's time for you to just sit and journal and reflect and start the process of getting to know yourself, and then eventually to really start to really like yourself and even to love yourself, because that's how you heal yourself ultimately from your burnout. So there's a lot there, but if I was going to sum it up in a sentence or two, I'd say, look, if you're a woman who's burnt out, or you're burning out, or you've got panic or anxiety or stomach problems, just be really kind to yourself. Look after yourself. You don't need to do more. You don't need to be better. You just need to slow down a little bit. Look after your physical body. Just slow down. Do all the things that you need to do to take care of your physical body, and make 2020 the year that you start to get on top of this burnout. The interesting thing about burnout is it kind of can come and go, right? There's a lot of us, it's my experience, it's the experience of friends of mine too, where we kind of get better from burnout and then we go back into burnout again, and then we come out and then we go back in again. You know, for me, I came in and out 3 times, and that was because I didn't ever never got around to, I changed the easy stuff, but I never got around to changing the hard stuff, and that's the stuff that was going on in the inside. The fact that I didn't like myself, there was no peace on the inside. So why don't you just make 2020 the year that you start to create some peace on the inside, look after your physical body, be nice to yourself, do less. Anyway, listen, if you've got questions, you want to reach out, all my details will be somewhere here. All my details will be, there's my website, Anyway, so if you want to reach out, please do. I'd love to hear from you. And otherwise, make sure you have some rest over the Christmas and New Year break and enjoy it. Thanks for listening.